Alright, this is a Honda Rancher 420 4x4. It's a 2010. I'm going to change the rear end differential. So, there's two ways you can do this. This is the differential. We're going to drain the oil out of it. There's a skid plate that is installed. I've already taken two of the bolts out. You can leave this plate on and do this, but I found that it just makes a mess. Makes it a little more difficult, so it's easier just to remove it. So I've already taken out two of the bolts. That's why it's flopping around. It uses a 12mm socket. I'm going to take this last bolt out. I'll show you what the plate looks like. There it goes. Put the bolt over here so I don't lose it. And there's the plate. So when you drain the oil with this installed, there's a hole right there in the center. You can see the light shining through it. That's where the oil would drip through eventually. And it tends to make a mess, especially if you've got mud, gunk, and debris collected in the skid plate. So I found it's just easier to remove it. So we're going to set that aside for now. And then we're going to look for the three bolts we need to do this. On top here is your fill cap. That can be removed with a 17mm wrench, and I've got that ready to go right here. And then on the left-hand side of the differential, right there, is the fill bolt, the fill line. And you can even see it says right there, oil check bolt. It says it's encasted inside there. So this is going to be removed later. We're not going to do that just yet. So I'm going to pause it for a second and get in position, and I'll show you where the drain plug is. Alright, we're on the right-hand side of the differential. That bolt by itself right there is the drain plug. So that's the one we're going to open up first, which is a 10mm socket will do it. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen that, put my oil catch pan underneath, and we're going to let the oil drain out of it. And I'm also going to clean it up too. It's awfully dirty. Alright, I've already loosened it. We're just going to take it off the rest of the way by hand. A little more. And here comes the oil. So we are going to let this drain now. And while that is draining, we're going to come up to the top here. And we're going to take our 17mm wrench, and we're going to loosen up this cap. So it's loose. We can take it off the rest of the way by hand. Set that aside. And then we're going to let this go ahead and just let this drain. And while that's draining, we're going to go to the next step and just get it ready to go. I'll show you that in a second. Alright, I've already loosened it with the socket wrench, but I'll take it off the rest of the way by hand. But this is the oil check bolt, or the fill line bolt. So we'll take that off. And we're just going to set that aside. That one's got a washer on it. And that's it. So we have three bolts removed, or the cap and the two bolts removed, I should say. And we're just going to let this continue draining for a few minutes, just make sure it all comes out. Once that's done draining, we'll go to the next step, which is replace the drain plug. And then I'll show you how to fill the differential up after that. Alright, I went ahead and reinstalled the drain bolt. Hand tightened it for now. I am now going to just tighten it snug. It doesn't need to be super tight. I don't have any torque specs or anything like that. I just put it on snug, and that's about it. It's not going to come off. So after I do that, we'll move to the next step, which is start filling it with oil. Alright, I've put the drain plug back in, I snugged it up, and I forgot to mention before I paused the video, but this is the bolt for the oil check side on the left hand side. They're the same bolt. Just make sure you put that washer back on. See right there, it's a crush washer. There's one for the oil check bolt and as well as the drain plug. Just make sure that's back on before you put the drain plug back on. So now the drain plug's on, it's time to put some oil in. I'm going to use Gear Saver Hypoid gear oil. It's 80 weight, 90 weight. It'll use about 8 ounces roughly, approximately. So we're going to fill it through the fill cap hole right there, and I'm just going to use a narrow neck funnel. And what we're going to do is we're going to be pouring oil in there, and while we're doing that, a little at a time, we're going to be watching this little hole here. When oil starts coming out of this oil check bolt hole, that means we're done. That's as much oil as it takes. It's not very much. It's just enough to fill the bottom of the casing, and then when the gears are spinning, it's just splashing it everywhere. So what I'm going to do is try and do this with 2 hands or with the camera. I'm going to start pouring the oil a little at a time, not very fast. There's a little bit, and we're going to watch that hole, and as soon as we start seeing oil coming out of that hole, I'm going to stop pouring. And hopefully I've got enough oil here. I've got about 8 to 10 ounces left in this container. And there we go. That's it. So that's all we have to do. I just dumped a bunch in, so it's probably going to drain a bunch out right now. But that's it. That's all you have to do. So we're going to let that settle, let that drain out. As soon as that's done draining out of the hole right there, I'm going to go ahead and replace that bolt with the bolt and the crush washer and hand tighten, and then just give it a little bit of a snug tight with the socket wrench. Alright, it took a minute or two, but because I overfilled it a little bit, but you can see it dripping now. So it's basically level now with the bolt, oil check bolt hole. So I'm going to go ahead and put the bolt on now with the crush washer and tighten it down. Alright, so we got the oil check bolt back in. Last thing to do is take your cap, just check it out, make sure that O-ring's good, it's not cracked or anything. And then go ahead and put it on by hand first, hand tighten it. And when you go to tighten this, do not over tighten, do not over torque it. It's hand tight now. All you need to do is barely a 1/8 to 1/4 of a turn. Maybe a 1/2 a turn at the most. Right there, it's tight, not even tight, it's just barely snug. I know from experience because I've actually over tightened this and it broke, it just stripped because it's all aluminum. Very easy to break. But that's it. So the last thing to do now is just put the skid plate back on. And that goes on just like that with the 4 bolts. And I'll tighten those down, and that's the last thing to do. I'm not going to show you how to do that because that's pretty self-explanatory, but it fits on just like that with the 3 bolts. And that's it. Front rear end differential is changed. And it's good for, I believe the book says 2 years, but I do it every year. Just to play it safe. So thanks for watching. Hope this helps somebody out there.